Oi guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far, with OpTic potentially staring down the barrel of a loser's bracket start at Major 4 in Burbank. Big questions have been raised by the likes of SlasheR as to whether this should even be possible. Format changes may be necessary, certainly for next season, to ensure that what we are seeing currently does not happen again with some of the top teams in the league. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, a few stats I wanted to run through here. These are the overall KD numbers for the stage so far. I will say these are noticeably lower than usual, and I think it shows how noticeably more competitive the league seems to be at the moment. Now, whether that's because the skill gap has been reduced, whether it's because the bottom teams are going harder, that's a matter for debate. But Attach is here at a 1.22, MettalZ is here at 1.12, MettalZ is here at a 1.13, and then some usual suspects, Simp, Scrappy, and Cellium. But even Cellium, you know, he's below a 1.2, which is rare for Zell. He's at a 1.19, and that's the highest KD this stage. But it goes to show that even the teams that are still winning most series, they're not exactly finding it super easy to dominate as they were not that long ago. The hardpoint KDs, we do get into the 1.2s with Scrappy with a 1.21, Insights here as well with a 1.19, Attach, MettalZ, HyDra, very similar set of players. Search and Destroy, however, this is when, because the sample size is fewer, right, when you play Search and Destroy maps, but of course in terms of kills, there's fewer to go around, so you end up having more skewed distributions generally. So anyway, Cell and Spart tied with 1.6s, MettalZ, Simp again. So some really consistent, players appearing at the top of these lists, and these are the control numbers. Cell with a 1.5, then it goes down to Dashy with a 1.21, aBeZy, DiamondCon, CleanX. So yeah, there you go. Some of the top performers from the stage so far. A couple of things I wanted to mention here that were talked about last night, especially on Shotzzy, right? Because Shotzy's POV, we know it's very entertaining, and he's definitely been OpTic's best performing player of the last, well, quite some time, I would say at this point. What do you guys think about this perspective from JKL? The CDL make a killing if they offered a premium fee subscription to watch matches through Shotzy's POV. I've argued for a long time for esports to find new ways like this to monetize the viewer base. Cosmetic bundles and jerseys are not a sustainable enough path to sustain profitability for these organizations and publishers. And Joey DeLuca, Handsome Merc, is giving his thoughts on the situation as well. So let me just give a brief trip back into the past here, because I'm pretty sure Infinite Warfare, there was MLG.TV still existed at the time, and I'm pretty sure they had an option to watch like a featured player. I'm not sure it was every player, but there was definitely a feature, I think it was the 2017 season, where it was possible to actually watch a specific POV. Like, I think maybe fans voted for which player they would watch, right? Because they would have, obviously, an observer choosing what the actual casters were watching and what we're watching from home, and then they would have another feed where you could just watch a specific player that was voted for. Maybe it was even an MW19 as well, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't. So, as Merc says, this has been tried multiple times by different games, including COD. Don't think it ever passed covering the cost of having and streaming each POV, not the interest you may expect. So, I think this is, if you do every POV, that is a lot of effort, right? Because you've got to have 8 different, basically, like, observer accounts going into every single player and then live streaming all of that to different feeds. That's a bit of a mess. But as JKL says, if it was just like one player per series, like, I would definitely be interested in watching that. Like, if it was a thing again, that the fans would, like, vote before a series, which of these 8 players do you want to see their POV of? And whoever won, they would get a permanent POV to watch. Now, would that be a premium subscription feature, right? Because it would be nice just to have, but if it's going to be paid for, who's going to pay for it? It's always a problem in the esports world. It has been for years. Especially because in regular sports, there are TV media rights deals, and there is in COD from YouTube to not the tune of that much. I mean, it's not billions, is it? Let's be honest, like it is for, let's say, the English Premier League. In Call of Duty, the revenues the teams are generating is nothing spectacular. It's good enough to keep them ticking over, but it's nothing that's going to go crazy in the medium to longer term. So the question really is there another way to go about it? Because esports fans are not really going to play to watch things, I think, in general. They will, however, play for, like, cosmetic bundles and stuff, and I think, to me, that is kind of the way that it may well need to continue going. For example, in Valorant, Riot Games, League of Legends, other games like this, Counter-Strike that do a really good job of pushing the in-game cosmetics, the bundles, the items. Like, the amount of money the teams make in Counter-Strike for just qualifying for the major, because if you qualify for the major, you get your stickers in the game, you get your holographic signatures and stuff like this that people can put on their guns or they can just keep. And, you know, obviously the market in Counter-Strike, it works differently because it's like an open market. There's Steam and you can buy and sell stuff and all this, but so it's slightly different, but it still gets the point across that these teams are making bank, as are the players, just by qualifying for what is effectively the World Championship of Counter-Strike. That is kind of similar to what happens in Valorant. In Valorant, the bundles are pushed very heavily. They're really good. The teams get lots of freedom on them. To some degree, they could have probably done a better job, but I think in general they did a pretty good job of promoting the Valorant bundles, and they've made an absolute killing for Riot, the publisher, taking 50%, and of course the teams who get, I guess, the other 50% of the revenue associated with that. So to me, that is the thing to look for, to push, because the organizations are going to sit there thinking, okay, we've got our sponsors, we've got our jersey sales, you know, we've got some other things. The bundles might be nice to improve on, but this is also probably the main reason why the investment from Saudi Arabia is becoming rather compelling, because these organizations are still struggling to make consistent money and actually sustain themselves, especially because the organizations largely act in, at least in esports, as effectively like an agency, really. They're not like, they're a team, but they kind of represent the players from a contractual level with sponsorship obligations, and then they, like, you know, pay them a salary to play Call of Duty or whatever the case is. But if the players want to leave and they want to go to another team, sure, maybe you can get a buyout, but often that doesn't happen because the player will be like, oh, well, you know, you don't want to get rid of me, I'm just going to bench myself, I'm just going to refuse to play, and I'm going to force my way out. And that's a pretty common tactic because it works. And it's not like I feel bad for the organizations precisely, because I do feel like many of these orgs over the last few years have massively mishandled their funds, and, you know, I don't feel bad for many of the decision makers, but I do feel like, you know, it's difficult as an organization to make it work. And, you know, that's why the Saudi Arabian Esports World Cup investment is proving rather compelling for many. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. But let's talk about what Austin's SlasheR leader coach has to say, because it's actually yesterday, 5 years ago yesterday, that the Anaheim Convention Center, the last time I was there, the last time that, well, the only time I was there, also the last time I was there, and the last time that Call of Duty Esports was there, 100 Thieves won Anaheim 5 years and a day ago. You know, I remember this event, it was class. It was a Hilton bar after the fact. SlasheR was in there having a good time. He was, you know, heading off, and I was like, oh, you know, well played, SlasheR, gave him a fist bump and all this. It was, yeah, good memories of, I mean, this was my first ever event that I went to in the US. I'd been to a couple in the UK before, in Birmingham 2018, and then London, that was 2 weeks before this, that 100 Thieves also won. And it was a cool event in the sense that at the time, Nadeshot didn't fly to London for the event, so they brought him on main stage on their phone. But obviously this event, Nadeshot was there on the main stage to accept the trophy with SlasheR, Octane, Kenny, Enable, and Priestahh. That was the team of 5, and as Kenny says, like, we were like super final at that event, and you know, nobody was going to beat us at the time and beyond. But let's talk about what SlasheR has to say, because he's had lots to say lately on many teams. Boston Breach especially, because they decided to make the controversial decision to get rid of him, right? They dropped him from the roster. He said after the fact that he had agreed with the rest of his teammates that Snoopy was effectively the problem, you know, without maybe being quite so blunt, but effectively that's what was implied, that he wasn't happy with Snoopy's performances, and the team seemed to agree, SlasheR, Priestahh, aBeZy, that they wanted to move on from Snoopy. I did actually ask SlasheR after the fact here on the Dope Chick show we did at the time, like, if they'd have told you that Snoopy's staying for sure, do you want to play? He would have said, you know what, sure, like, I'll still play. I'm not going to drop myself for no good reason. That was possibly what was effectively told to Priestahh, maybe, as that Priestahh was, you know, maybe Priestahh wasn't keen to keep Snoopy, but he basically had the choice between either playing with Snoopy or leaving the team and getting dropped, which obviously, you know, you're not going to do realistically. But SlasheR did. The team decided, you know what, SlasheR and Snoopy, that's irreparable, so, you know, we're just going to get rid of SlasheR. And obviously, in the longer term, it's proven, you know, SlasheR's been rather happy and has been tweeting about it as a result, having lost, you know, 14 series in a row, effectively, since they brought SlasheR out of the team, and they made the roster change that they have decided to, and it's not worked out rather well, if you guys hadn't noticed. But obviously we know that SlasheR also is not a big fan of online cards. I mean, that was even true this season when SlasheR had some really good performances on LAN, and I think the Boston Major especially, SlasheR played like one series up to 1.5 and they lost, so he weren't happy mad about that. But obviously he started in losers, because of online COD. And the feeling is, for myself and for many others, we want online COD to have less importance going forward. I still think online COD should exist, maybe not in the current way that qualifiers do, maybe in like weekend 2Ks, 5Ks to do seeding for the big majors. Hopefully we get more majors. That's one intention of next year. But the way that it currently works, having, 7 qualifiers as it currently is, the top 8 start in winners, the bottom 4 start in losers, it's not great, especially as SlasheR says, if you've won the previous event, should it not be almost guaranteed that you start in the winner's bracket, right? In most sports, if you've won the previous events, you auto-qualify with a good seed for the next event, obviously. Not all sports that's true, but there is an argument to say that in this sport, that quite possibly could, or at least should be true. And this is when, if you look at the current CDL standings, you'll find something like this, at least for this particular stage. This is, I think, the problem with 12 teams, fundamentally, because with 12 teams, there's only so much you can do. You've got to start teams and losers. That's just how the bracket has to work out, unfortunately, if you want to do 12 teams, because you can't do, 4 groups of 3, like it just doesn't really work. 16 teams, you've got options. You can do 4 groups of 4, of which the top 2 advance to an 8-team bracket, and the other 2, maybe the bottom team drops out entirely, and the third place team starts in the losers bracket. That's possible. That's effectively what we do right now, but instead of doing group play on the Friday at the major, we do group play over 5 weeks of qualifiers going into the major and setting the bracket that way. Also, if there were 16 teams, you could absolutely do a 16-team double in bracket like we used to do for the World Championship. So there are some options out there, and SlasheR basically says that the format is it's not screwing OpTic in the sense that they've underperformed and therefore they are in the position that they are in because they've played poorly. And as SlasheR says, not sure what happened to OpTic this stage, they should have done better. But I still stand by the fact that teams, especially a previous winner or top placer, but even just teams in general, should not be starting in losers from online play, which I do agree with, but the problem is that the way the format is going to work right now, that is simply a necessity, unless there are 16 teams, or unless something else dramatic changes. So I did also want to share what Scrappy had to say on this, just a few thoughts on the OpTic team.
How do you think Nerik and OpTic seem to struggle versus the bottom 8 teams lately? I don't know, bro. I just think they're probably fucking bored.
Slide right to the bomb and plan in. We were going to have
Who's
a
not
1v1
bored
on
playing
our
these?
hands, but
besides if
in
you're
round 11 for Minnesota,
playing
what do
for
you
your
think happened
life
here?
at champs.
I think we went wrong.
They're pretty
could have just
boring.
had someone.
Do you think the bottom 8 teams are catching up?
Sitting and holding
Yeah, I would say for sure. They're also just playing.
Actually pushing the flank.
I think
It was pretty
also
predictable at that point.
some people might not take VOD of like bottom 8 teams serious, but the bottom 8 teams, again, like I said, their whole fucking season is on these matches.
All right, let's go to the next series of the day. We have this one also.
I just think that they're probably just hard countering. Like this high rise.
Map and our major 3 champions
I don't know.
again. I think that's 3
I didn't watch it, so
right?
we
For
won't
OpTic
see,
Texas. 111
3
kills
people in the lobby have 20,000
in the red carpet range, and then on the other
109
side,
kills.
everybody from
Thieves back?
Carolina really pulling
How's this
some
fat
weight here.
fuck
I felt
just
like
rinsing
everybody did
kids?
their thing.
No doubt it's difficult for OpTic to maintain their focus and momentum after winning the major, and given the fact that the bottom teams are where they are. But at the end of the day, your job is to play Call of Duty, right? Your job is to be the best you possibly can at Call of Duty, and obviously Scrappy understands, like, probably not playing as well for a couple of reasons. That might be one of them, but nonetheless, they've got to figure it out quickly, right? Because OpTic will probably join Toronto as the 3rd team in CDL history to win 30-plus series in back-to-back seasons. FaZe have done it basically every single year. Toronto did it last year with 30 and 18. This year, they're 30 and 8 so far. So actually very impressive from Toronto, 30-plus series again. OpTic did it last year with 30-plus. This year, they're now 1 away from getting to 30-plus. So assuming they beat Boston next weekend, they should be absolutely fine. But very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.